This should be a fun stream today because we'll explore a library which I wanted to explore quite a while ago already. So I'm super interested, super excited to dive into that. Because today we'll explore a library, Remotion, which I've never used before. So this might also be interesting because you can see how I learn new stuff because, again, I haven't used it before. Because that's a library that allows us to build videos, so MP4 files, programmatically with React. And I want to explore that because I got a couple of use cases, a couple of situations where I would love to create videos automatically, so with code. And I'm not talking about tutorials, obviously. I love doing those in person, and there isn't really a way of automating those, I guess, besides when AI will take away all our jobs. But I'm talking about other kinds of videos where I maybe want to show some concept, or where I maybe want to produce YouTube shorts in a bit of a more efficient way with certain pre-built components, because that's what React is all about in the end. So that's why I want to explore Remotion. So yeah, hi everybody who's just joining right now. It is, of course, obviously a bit of a more niche topic. Probably not a library a lot of people know, or maybe everybody knows it and I'm just the only one who doesn't, but I have never heard about it. So yeah, should be fun. So without further ado, let's dive right into it, shall we? Remotion.dev is, wow, this is lagging. Not sure if that's a good sign. Remotion.dev is the site. And as they say there, this is a library that allows you to create real MP4 videos with React. Well, we got some examples here. This is really slow. I've been on this site before. The site is normally not slow. It might be because I'm recording right now. And it's a library you can use for free if you are an individual or in a small company, and you need a company license if you're a bit bigger. And I think they also have some products, some let's say extended versions of this library, like this editor starter, which is a full-blown video editor for the browser. So this thing here is not DaVinci or Premiere Pro. This is this Remotion library and the building blocks it gives you used to build a video editor. So you can use that library not just to build videos programmatically and render them as MP4 files. You can, as it seems, also use this library to build video editors and therefore probably tools that help you edit and control videos. So really interesting, obviously, for me as someone who is creating videos a lot. So yeah, we'll see what's included. This editor starter, as far as I know, is something you have to buy though. So that's not available for free, if I'm correct. Yeah. But you could probably build it yourself with the building blocks they're giving you. That's my understanding, at least. And therefore, let's just create a project, because again, I've never touched this library before. That is totally blind. It's a blind let's play, or a let's code, so to say. So I will just create a new project with their instructions here and see what that gives me and how it will work. I've got no terminal windows. Let me quickly bring one over. Here we go, and let's go into the in the right folder. And I did prepare. Did I not prepare a folder for that? Well, then we'll create one together. I'll run this command to create a new project. Yeah, here we go. And oh, they got a lot of templates. What do we have here? So we could go with the basic hello world. It's probably what I'll use. But they also have complete Sass templates based on Next.js. Got a blank one. Got a video production tool. Okay, that's also the basic project, but just JavaScript, so without React. Wow. That is a lot. They got a React Native starter. Okay, what is this library? That's the paid one, the editor starter, but the other ones are all free. Wow. But I think I'll just go with Hello World and then switch to a different template later, maybe. Is it like Canva or Adobe? No, it's not sponsored, by the way. But thanks for just assuming that. I know, but no. By the way, fun fact, a true story. I have never in my entire life done a sponsored stream or video on none of my YouTube channels, not in this live stream. Nothing sponsored, not a single dollar. So yeah, please don't assume stuff that's just made up. I hate that. Not a nice character trait. It's not like Canva or Adobe. It's a library, a React library, so that you can build your own stuff with it in React. It's not a tool that's ready to use, though we have some starting projects that maybe give you tool-like experiences, but yeah, it is a library. So I'll name it Remotion First Steps, because that's what I want to do. Yeah, I'll add Tailwind, and I'll then open this in Cursor. Though it will be interesting to see. Obviously, I'll probably use some AI for writing some code or for helping me with writing code. It will be interesting to see how well AI is able to deal with that library, how well it knows it. Probably better than I do. So let's see what we got here. And for that, let's just start it. What is the command? It's npm. So I need to install dependencies and then npm run dev. So let's go here and install those dependencies. Yeah, have a great day too, Sop. And again, thanks for everybody who joined. Let's explore this library and see what it is. And yeah, thank you so much, Mustafa. And I probably got a bit more emotional there than I should have, but I'm really, well, as I said, I've never done a sponsored video, so I'm not a big fan of being called out for it. Even if I would ever do it, it would be my first one, but I haven't. So yeah, here we go, npm run dev, and let's see what that gives us. Okay, so it opened the browser for me. I'll bring that over here. And okay, that's the Hello World project. It's a video editor, as it seems, which is interesting because they had that paid video editor. So what do we have here? Only logo, Hello World. Let's press play. Okay, we got the React logo. And now what exactly is that here? Is that now a video? I think it's not a video, right? So that is just the DOM, just some animations, but you could render that into a video. So that's the really interesting part. Like, I'm really excited about this because I like projects and technology like this. This is all really just a website, even if it doesn't look like one. This part here, that is all just rendered DOM. That's just rendered React components, as I understand it, based on this code here. And we could turn this into a video by clicking render, probably. So then I could, wow, this is really a complex Hello World starter, I'll say that. So what can we do? Title text, well, I'm overwhelmed. Input, okay, so that is, okay, I see. So that is a React component with its own input props. So you can, as it seems, define components that will be rendered as a video, and you can have some inputs to that. So I could say hello from Max here. Leave all the rest as it is, probably. I'm not sure what I control with picture and what all the other stuff here allows me to do. Well, obviously, I understand that we can choose from different codecs. If I now click render video, renders, starting job, I assume that's going to get rendered on my system now. Yeah, so here's the rendering I see. Rendering frames, encoding video. This is for React, but in the starter templates, I saw that there was an option to use plain JavaScript, but I don't think they have support for other libraries. So on their site, I really, they say with React here. So they got Next.js and so on, different templates, but I think it's all React in the end. So looks like it was rendered. Now let's open that. Here we go. That's the video file we just rendered, saying hello from Max with that text I entered. And that, again, is based on React components. So it gives us a programmatic way of creating videos, which I find really exciting. Now, what I find also really interesting, and again, I've never created a project with that before, so this is all brand new to me. What I also find quite interesting is that it gives us an editor down here, but I think, so I can only move that playhead, but not, I can't interact with these timelines here, with these sequences. I can hide them, but I cannot drag them around or anything like that. No, you're not late. We're just getting started, Irfan. We're exploring Remotion, which is a library that allows us to build videos programmatically with React. And it's the first time I'm taking a look at it, so it's all brand new for me too. Okay, so that is what we got here. We got a full-blown editor. Let's now dive a bit more into the code to understand how this project is set up. So we probably start with index.ts or root, probably with index. Yeah, in index.ts, we're importing Remotion root from the root file and then register root from the Remotion library. So basically like you would normally set up a project, a React project. In a normal React project, you also have like that root node which you render. We have the same here as it seems. And then in a root TSX, what do we have here? Importing some styles. And that is essentially just Tailwind because we are using Tailwind here. So index CSS is really just importing that. Which version of Tailwind are we using? Oh, we're using version 4. Nice. Okay, so we got that. Importing a composition component and then other custom components. Each composition is an entry in the sidebar. So this stuff here, right? That here. We got a hello world composition. We got an only logo composition. I'm not sure how they work together. If these are two different videos I would render out, or if it's one video combined consisting of both. But I think it's two different videos, right? And I will also dive into the docs soon. So we got this hello world composition. We got the other composition. We got our props here, which are also the props I assume I could change during rendering. And then we pass the component that defines our composition, that defines our video, so the root component of a video, I would say, as a value to component probably. And yeah, we configure the video here too. We configure the resolution, width and height. We could probably also go to 2K here and 4K if we wanted to. So what is 2K? I think it's this, right? So we could probably go to 2K. And if I then render this by clicking render, let's see, other, can I also change it here? There's so much to configure. Still. So can I also render like a screenshot here? So if I now render this, does it render a 2K video? I can also see the progress here. Encoded. So I can open this. Does it not say? Yeah, dimensions is, so now it's a 2K video. And is it scaled up automatically? Okay, it's broken if I change that resolution. Interesting. So I probably would need to adjust the code. So the logo is broken now when I change this to 2K. Okay. And again, I'm just playing around here because I haven't used that before. So that's that. So I'll change it back. Let's take a look at Hello World at this component. So that's this component. And then we got the Hello World folder 2 with more components. So Hello World is a React component because, again, that's the idea here. And in there, we're using a bunch of stuff from Remotion. It's a bit weird that we have two different imports here. I guess we could just import Spring from Remotion like this. I'm a fan of having one import. I'm also a fan of grouping my imports, have the library imports first. And then we have use current frame, use video config. I will have to dive into the docs to understand this probably. Spring for animation stuff, interpolate for animation stuff, returning some components, which are all coming from, and not all, but some like absolute fill are coming from the library. That is really just like a, yeah, as I say here, it's like a div. That's the background essentially, and then we can place elements on top of that background, like the logo. And that logo, does that have fixed dimensions, or why was it distorted when I changed the resolution? Arc, rotation. Yeah, we got some fixed values going on here. Yeah, so that is essentially like 960. That is, of course, 1920 by 2. And that's 1080 by 2. And that are, of course, the resolutions we got here. So there clearly is a connection. So that was why it was distorted, probably. Oh, we got a lot of questions. Hey Max, grateful for all your live streams and courses, unlike in your courses where we can find attached or prepared code. Here, I get to see you reading the docs, fix bugs. Yeah, I think that's the nice part about live streams. You can see me fail, you can see me learn, you can see how I approach things, and therefore, obviously, it's a bit less streamlined, right? You will see some... We have these situations in live streams where I get stuck, often on stupid mistakes, and you have to bear with me, but that can also be interesting to see, I guess. So, yeah, I like that too. New React technology should be fun. I hope so. Definitely an interesting library. I mean, that library is not new. I think it exists, I don't know, when was the first release? A couple of years old, but I've never used it. So, yeah, super excited about it too. Would you suggest getting more help with documentation? How would you, oh, no, there was a question. How would you recommend just getting better at programming as a whole? You gotta build stuff. Getting better at programming is all about building stuff. You can take 1,000,000 courses, and thank you so much for everybody that's following. You can get 1,000,000 courses and go through them, and obviously, if they're my courses, I'm happy. That earns me money. But no, seriously, if you want to get better, you got to build stuff, because you have to run into those problems. You have to get stuck. You have to find solutions. Now with AI, it's easier than ever to find solutions, which can also be a problem, because you might be taking the easy route and you don't really learn a lot if you always do that. But still, building stuff, not always taking AI immediately, or at least thinking about what AI did for you and checking if that maybe is not the best way to solve a certain problem. That's how you get better. Hello from Poland. Hello back to Poland. And any plan to make a video on Next 16? Yeah, I probably should, right? I haven't looked into it yet. It was a busy week that week, but yeah, I should. You're right. What is the Twitch channel name? You mean my channel? That is that's maxed apps. So twitch.tv, if I could type, /maxed apps. So let's get back to the project and let's get this out of the way here. Oh, there was a question if I want to open it. No. So let's close that and let's go back into the code. So we get some hard-coded dimensions here, which is the reason for why this was distorted. I wonder if there is some way of automatically getting the current video's dimension. And since there's a lot of stuff I'm wondering about, I think it's time to take a look at the official docs. Because that is in the end where you learn stuff. And I could also ask AI. I'm just not sure how well it knows this project. And if I'm really learning about something the first time, I'm a big fan of diving into docs and reading what the people that created the thing wanted me to read. And they got an Ask AI button here anyways, so I guess we can use that to dive a bit deeper. The idea of Remotion is to give you a frame number and a blank canvas to which you can render anything you want using React. So one thing, sorry, I gotta go back. One thing, where is this video editor coming from? Is that coming from register root? Because here we're just rendering these compositions. I mean, in this project here, there is no editor, right? These components here, that's all. That's not creating this editor, right? So all these controls here, this overlay, all that stuff here, that must be coming right from the library. So that code is not included here. I mean, it's included in the library probably, but it's not included here in my source code, right? I can't edit this editor. Okay, so back to the docs. So in the end, we're building videos. And let's maybe build a new one to see how things work. So back in root, I will comment out those compositions and I'll add a new composition instead. I want to build a brand new video. And I will build this composition in line with what they're telling me here. I'll copy that code and then analyze it thereafter. So I will add a first steps TSX file, paste it in there, export a function, a component function called first steps video, or I guess they're calling it composition, so let's call it composition. Let's keep that output here. And then back in root, yeah, I think these suggestions by cursor look good. Component is first steps composition. We define a duration. Let's go for, so that's frames. I got 30 frames per second, so that would be 5 seconds, which is fine. And let's stick to that width and height. I'm happy with that. So we got our composition here. A video is a function of images over time, so frames per second. If you change content every frame, you'll end up with an animation. Yeah, sure, that's how videos work in general, and that's their idea too. You build a website in the end, or you build a video like you would build a website by combining components. And then if you animate those components and you record that, you got a video in the end. Like, that is their idea, as I understand it. A video has 4 properties: a width, a height, a duration in frames, and a FPS. So that is what we're setting here on our composition. So our composition is in the end a video, I would say. Not sure if there is a difference in this project. And you can obtain these values from the use video config hook. So I guess that would be a fix here in Arc, where we have these values here, which don't work in a 2K resolution. If I would use video config and the width and height there, and we would derive these values from there, it probably would work. We can actually try that. If I copy all that, put that into my component, But then here for CX, CY, I use width divided by 2 and height divided by 2. And I'm not sure about RX and RY, how I would have to change that. But that should allow us to scale whatever we're building here, this SVG, scale that to a higher video resolution, I guess, this ellipse here. But let's go back to the basics. Okay, so we configure a video with width, height, and so on, and then we can get those config values with use video config and then build our components and then render them accordingly. A video's first frame is 0 and the last frame is duration and frames -1. Okay. A composition is the combination of a React component and video metadata. By rendering composition components, you can register a renderable video and make it visible in the Remotion sidebar. Okay, so that editor is coming from, it's obviously coming from the library and not in our source code. Yeah, makes sense. You can register multiple compositions. Yeah, we had that in root, right? Initially, we had 2 compositions here. We have that, but when we render each as an individual video. Preview your video. You can preview your video by starting the Remotion Studio. So that is what we started with npm run dev. That's that studio, which gives us this well, what we see here. So here's first steps, for example. If we play that, we can see that the frame counter goes up. And that's the case because in my brand new first steps component, I'm just rendering this text here, and frame is dynamic, and it's coming from use current frame, which is a hook coming from Remotion, which gives us the current frame number. And it looks like this component is re-rendered every frame, which is why this updates. So yeah, hi to everybody who joined. Lots of people here, super exciting. Medusa.js, I have not heard of that, to be honest. And why do I not make my best courses on YouTube like Udemy? Well, the obvious difference is that on Udemy I get paid for it. So, and on YouTube, if, well, on YouTube, especially nowadays, short form content performs way better than long form content, and I don't earn money from it, so it's not super attractive, to be honest. I rather do live streams like this, which also don't earn me a lot of money, no money at all, to be honest, but which are way more fun, and I upload them thereafter. I upload all my live streams to YouTube at Maximilian Extended, and I guess these are like mini courses, which are also totally for free. And that is the way better deal, I think. So let's go back. The fundamentals, we went through these. Animating properties. Animation works by changing properties over time. Let's create a simple fade in animation. So use current frame gives us the current frame number. And then we can obviously use that to kind of calculate a value that changes over time, which then gives us an animation. So in my first steps here, I could maybe add a paragraph here with that text, and then below that add a div, which I just give some inline style here. Obviously we could all, or I guess we have Tailwind, right? So we can also just say BG red, size 10. And that will give us a red rectangle. And with that, of course, well, let's make it bigger. Let's go for a size 30. That will give us a red rectangle. Let's also add some margin to the top, this one. And if I now want to move that rectangle, I can, of course, get my rectangle position here. And I think they got extra helper functions, which we should use for animations. But a basic naive implementation would be to get a rect offset, which is 0 initially. No, which is actually just the frame times 10, let's say. And then we could go to the style here and use the CSS transform property to translate this rectangle on the x-axis, which means push it on the x-axis into a certain direction. And that value, the rect offset, that will change every frame, so 30 times per second. And we push that rectangle further and further to the right, I think, if this is a positive number, as the video plays. So if I now hit play, oops, if I go back to the beginning and I hit play, this gets pushed over to the right. And again, that is just code, but we're creating a video here with code. And I think that opens up a lot of possibilities for automating video production. Obviously only certain types of video, but you can define whatever you want and predefine an animation, but then have props or maybe different input images and generate videos based on your code with different inputs. And that is really, really interesting to me. So yeah, that is how we can animate this. But we can also animate with the interpolate function. And I think we would want to do that instead of just changing a value every frame. Not just for simplicity reasons, but also probably for performance reasons, because that is typically not the most performant way. You want to do request animation frame behind the scenes, I guess, and have performance optimized animations. Because obviously, if you're building a video with code, there will be a lot of stuff moving around, and you want to have an optimized way of updating the DOM every frame. So how does interpolate work? The variable to interpolate, the input range and the output range. In this example, we map the frames 0 to 60 to their opacity values. So 0 to 60 mapped to 0 to a range from 0 to 1, so that as the frame increases from 0 to 60, the opacity value here changes from 0 to 1. And use the extrapolate right setting to clamp the output so that it never becomes bigger than 1. So in our case here, if I were to use interpolate, let's see what it's suggesting. 0 to 150, because I got 150 frames in total, because that is my duration in frames here. So the video will go from 0 seconds to 150 seconds. And during that period, I want to change my offset from 0, so that we're starting at the original position of the rectangle, to 100 pixels offset to the right. So therefore, now we're also changing that rect offset, but with that built-in interpolate function. So if I go back here to the start and I click press, yeah, it's moving. It's just moving super slow. I should probably map this to 500. And now it would be a bit more visible, the movement. So by the end of the video, this rectangle will have been pushed to the right by 500 pixels. That is the idea. Okay. And I guess what we can do is we can get the video config with use video config. And the video config, this object, should have, I hope, our duration in frames. So then we could, and I hope that is not some huge anti-pattern, but I could then derive that frame range of my video dynamically, so that I don't have to hard code 150 here. Because if I do that, of course, if I go back to root and I change my duration to 300, oh, now suddenly this will only take half the video. So if I do that, now the video will run for 10 seconds, but after half the video, after 5 seconds, so around here, that rectangle should stop moving or not. Does it not stop because I have not set extrapolate right to clamp? What if I do that? Yeah. So extrapolate right clamp will make sure that it doesn't continue extrapolating after it reaches the upper bound of my range here. So once it reached 500, it will stop with this setting. But if I set this here to video config duration and frames, it will now still stop at 500 pixels, but it will get there slower because now it takes... You're right, it should be -1. You're right. It should, good point. It should be duration frames -1, I think. Because in the docs they said that the highest frame, the maximum frame is duration frames -1 because the first frame is 0. So that should now make sure that over the entire video duration, it goes all the way to its end position, which is around here, which are these 500 pixels to the right. So we're getting close, and that's that. Okay, so that's interpolate using spring animations. Spring animations are a natural animation primitive. These are typically these animations that feel like they have gravity to it. So like these bouncy and yeah, these non-boring animations. These are spring animations. So here they're using a spring animation to animate the scale of text. I want to again animate my box, my rectangle or my square. How does that work? Spring takes the FPS, so the frames per second as input, and then the current frame. But what is scale? Well, let's just try it. So, does that make any sense? I'm not sure if it makes sense, to be very honest. It can read my mind. Cursor can read my mind. It suggests to use spring. Okay, so what does it give me? Spring, frame, FPS, config. Yeah, so in config, that is where you can like typically control, and that's the same for other animation libraries as well. You can control the gravity part, so how heavy an object feels, which will be accounted in the animation and so on. So yeah, let's just go with the damping, which is suggested here, and let's see what that gives us. So if I now press play, let's see, it's not moving. It's possible that it suddenly starts moving towards the end. But no, I don't think spring makes sense here. What is the value that we get as a result here? What is rect offset? So yeah, as you can see, it's a value that changes, but that's always super close to 1. Initially, I guess, it's not 1, though. Yeah, it quickly ramps up to 1. So, I wonder, duration and frames. What if I change this? Now it should be ramping up much slower. Still, since it is a value that will go from 0 to 1, I want to multiply that, and by 500, let's say, and now we should see an effect. Yeah. Now we got an animation, but it's not a linear animation. Instead, as you see, it starts, it accelerates, it becomes quicker, it gets quicker, and then it slows down again. And obviously for this kind of animation, for like a 10-second movement, that's not the animation mode you would typically use, but that can be a nice animation if you want to animate a box popping in, like a pop-up that quickly appears, because then that it often looks better if that is like if it has this acceleration and if it, you know what I mean, right? These animations that look a bit more natural. That's what you can achieve with spring animations. So if I would do this here over a duration of, let's say, 60 frames, which is 2 seconds, we should see that now quickly this slides over but slows down towards the end, right? So slides over, slows down. If I tune this down to 1 second, this is even more visible. So yeah, and that looks a bit nicer typically than the interpolate one. I can do that for comparison. And sorry if we got some nerdy, nitty-gritty, boring stuff like this today, but that is the kind of thing I want to understand when using a library like this. So if I have rect2 offset, or let's call it rect spring offset. So that is the first div here. And then I got a second div, and that will be the rect interpolate offset, which uses the other technique. That's the second one. And there I will set this duration also to 30 frames so that we have the same duration. Let's see if we can see a difference now. You see the upper one, this one here, whoops, this one here, that is the spring one, which should feel a bit more natural. So if I click play, you see that slides over, whereas the bottom one is the more boring interpolated one, which has a linear movement, which is sometimes what you want, but which can sometimes, if you want to have something pop in, be the more boring one, the one that feels less natural. But enough of that. Always animate using use current frame. Watch out for flickering issues during rendering that arise if you write animations that are not driven by use current frame, for example, CSS transitions. So we are using use current frame. We use that as an input for both interpolate and spring, and we want to always use that. Reuse components. Sure, it's React, so we can build components once and use them multiple times. That makes sense. Whoops, did not want to go back. Sequence. You can use the sequence component to limit the duration of the first title and time shift the appearance of the second title. Yeah, I was just wondering. Right now, of course, this first steps component here, which I got here in my root, in this composition, which makes up this entire video. Right now, that starts at the beginning and goes all the way to the end. Now, my understanding is that I could go into first steps and wrap a sequence component, which is imported from the Remotion package around that. And for example, say from, let's say, 60. And now, assuming that these are frames, we should only start 2 seconds into the video. So if I go back, at the beginning, you can also see it here. There's nothing here in this timeline, in this Remotion Studio. This is an empty space. So for the first 2 seconds, nothing is getting rendered because I got no other component. And after 2 seconds, it's rendered. But these boxes are already at their final position because their animation still starts at the beginning. I'm just not rendering or showing that on the screen. So to work around that, we would have to change the point in time where these animations start playing. And I'm not sure yet how we do that. Probably by wrapping sequence around the component that contains that animation code, I would guess. So if I have my boxes TSX file here, and I export a default function boxes, and I then grab all that code here. Well, actually, I'll just grab everything here. If I put that in here into boxes, and I then import all that stuff from Remotion, whoops, interpolate, spring, and not sequence. I will not render sequence here. I'll put that into a different file. So my assumption is that if I have this component here, which has just the two boxes on absolute fill, which is the background, and the animations, and then in first steps, I only keep the sequence. I get rid of all that code, get rid of everything here. Whoops, remove unused imports. If I now put my boxes here into that sequence, I would hope that the animations only start once the sequence starts. So let's play that. And yeah, that's the case. Okay. So you can wrap sequence around components to control when that component becomes visible, and it's then at that point of time that the animations play in that sequence. Got it. Okay. Note that the value of useCurrentFrame has been shifted in the second instance so that it returns 0 only when the absolute time is 40. Okay, so useCurrentFrame gives us the current frame number, but that frame number shifts to the first frame number shifts to the value of that from value, so that we don't start at frame 0, but at frame 60, which is the reason why the animations are delayed as they should be. I think I got that. Designing visuals, transforms. Animation occurs when the visual properties of an element transform over time. Let's look at the 5 common ways to transform an element. So what do we have here? We got scale, we got rotations, we got movements. We got skewing, twisting, we got rotations, we got movement. And the first one is opacity. So this is fading in. Opacity determines how visible an element is, sure. Scale determines how big an element is. That makes sense. Skew is if it's distorted. Yeah, so that makes sense. Nothing new here. We can also combine them. Use the make transform helper. We can install an extra helper library. And that will... What does this do? Make transform. Oh, so that is just a shortcut for giving us a value we can then use in CSS. Is that it? Functions that support you in animating CSS styles. Okay. Assets. To import assets in Remotion, create a public folder and use static file to import. So that is how we could include an image in our video. We can use the image component, which is coming from Remotion. What's special about that? The image tag can be used like a regular image HTML tag. If you use image, Remotion will ensure that the image is loaded before rendering the frame. Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Obviously, we don't want the image to suddenly pop in. We want it to be ready when the video starts playing, because that would look horrible if it would work in any other way. Okay. There is a special library for using GIFs, however you say it. We can also pass images by URL, in which case they will be fetched before rendering begins, I guess. Using image sequences. If you have a series of images, for example, exported from another program, you can interpolate the path to create a dynamic import. Okay, so you can construct that path dynamically if you had images named like this, for example. And that's something I read before, using video. That is interesting. So we're building a video with React components, right? But you can also include a video. So you can render a new video that includes another video, but that also, in addition, renders components that could interact with that other video, which is really exciting, I think. We got 3 different components for doing so. To keep the timeline and your video in sync, because obviously we want to make sure that as our component created video is rendered, the video we're embedding, which is an actual video file, is in sync and is not skipping frames or playing with a delay or anything like that. So that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so that's that. Audio. And again, we'll get back into the code and play around with that a bit. I just want to get an overview of what's in that library. Using audio, sure, because many videos don't just have visuals, but also audio, of course, using CSS. We can also use Tailwind. We are using Tailwind indeed. We can add custom fonts. So all the things we would typically want. Dynamic duration based on assets. To make your video durations dependent based on your assets, see dynamic duration, FPS, and dimensions. Okay. Okay, well, we'll get back to that later. Okay. So we can include all kinds of assets into our video. We cannot just render boxes. Layers. Unlike normal websites, a video has fixed dimensions. That means it is okay to use position absolute. Makes sense. Yeah, I mean, we don't need responsive design here because we're not building a website. We're building something that should be rendered as a video. So we work with layers similar to what we know from, for example, Premiere Pro. If you work with Premiere Pro by Adobe, you also have layers there. You can have multiple video clips layered on top of each other. And if you shrink the one on top, the one below it will be visible in the places that are not occupied by the top one. So that's something you can do. And for that, we got this absolute fill component, which we of course already see here in the boxes component. There we got this absolute fill layer, which gives us the background essentially. So I guess this creates a layer and adds a background to it. An easy way to do it is using the absolute fill component. What are they saying about it? A helper component, it is an absolutely positioned div with the following style. So we could also create that manually. This component is useful for layering content on top of each other. For example, you can use it to create a full screen video background. Yeah, that's what we're doing. If you want to only show an element for a certain duration, you can use sequence. We used that already. Let's see what they're saying about that. By using sequence, you can time shift the display of your components or parts of your animation in the video. I built a Remotion app to automate those focus Pomodoro timer videos for YouTube, but took me like 1 day to render one video, so I kind of give up. Wow, that is a long. So yeah, I mean, right now I'm just building like dummy stuff. Will be interesting to see if I can actually use it for automating useful stuff once I got a bit more knowledge about it. Explain Remotion to me like I'm 5. I'm no Remotion expert, to be honest. I'm just getting started with it. But Remotion is a React library that allows you to build videos and render videos with React. So you build an animated website and you render that as a video, if you want to call it like this. Yeah, so, okay, the sequence component allows us to control when a certain component will be rendered in the end. Transitions. To transition between two types of absolutely positioned content, you can use transition series. Okay, so we got sequences. I guess that's interesting. So we get the first steps, and currently I'm rendering them after 2 seconds. Now I will render them right from the start, the boxes I mean. But then after the boxes, I want to have my circles. And sorry for rendering boring stuff here during this exploration phase. Circles. And I will animate them in the same way, but I'll make them blue and I'll turn them into circles by using rounded full. And then back in first steps, which is my video composition, I'll include circles, but I'll include those in a separate sequence. Whoops. No cursor, thank you very much. Sequence. Like this. And then here I want to say, how can I control when this ends? Or does this automatically end when I add from 60 here? No. I should have read that sequence article. Sequence from, oh, duration and frames, that controls how long it is. Okay, so I can say the first sequence starts at the beginning, but is only 60 frames long, and then the next one starts. And now if I start, we first have these animated rectangles, and then we have the animated circles, which is obviously not super exciting, but shows us that switching between sequences works. But we can also transition between sequences, as it seems, by using a transition series. So there we also define sequences, but with help of the transition series sequence component, which also has duration and frames, and probably also from. But then what? Yeah, then we control which kind of transition we want to play. So here we could say this is a transition series. Do I need to add that as an extra library? From Remotion transitions. At Remotion transitions. Is that not installed? Do I need to install that as a separate component? Available from version 4.059. Which version do I have here? Whoops. Remotion 4. Oh. So they gave me an old version? So the starter does not come with the latest version? Oh, these are fixed to that version. So, okay, if I go to, let's say, the latest version 4, let me just quickly delete node modules and reinstall. Let's see if that works. I want to use those latest features. So first steps. No, it was, but it's at Remotion. But transitions is not a library I have here. So I guess at Remotion transitions, I'll install it. Maybe it would have worked with the older Remotion version I had. Maybe I didn't even have an older one. And I think I'm... No, this was a newer version anyways. My bad. But still, changing those like this doesn't hurt. So I had the latest version. But now I can use a transition series and then a transition series sequence and close that here and use it here. This does not have a from prop though. So I guess they're automatically played after each other. So all I need to specify here is a duration in frames. And that will then basically line them up one after another. So now transition series is visible here as a extra timeline, but it's just a wrapper in the end. And then they're playing after another, but now I can control how we transition. by by doing a bunch of stuff. I need to understand that what am I doing here? So we got the transition series, sure, with the sequences. And we can specify a transition component here, which has a timing, which controls how long the transition takes, I guess. And then the presentation, which controls the kind of transition, would be my assumption. And we got spring timing for this more natural feel or linear timing. So if I want to add a transition between this first sequence and this sequence here, I guess I add a transition series transition. And then the timing is what? The timing is the value of calling spring timing or linear timing. So I can call spring timing here to get that more natural feel. And give this a duration of, let's say, 15 frames, so half a second. No, there is no easing. At least not on this object. But we can add a config. Yeah, since it is a spring, we can again add damping, set the mass, so how heavy it feels, play around with that. And then for the presentation, I saw there is a special package, add remotion transitions. And then we got different built-in transitions. Let's go for a slide. And let's see, what do we have in there? We have slide. And then here we call slide. And that should now play a slide transition, hopefully, between these two sequences. So let's see. Yeah, so it's now, it's now playing that slide. It's sliding one frame to the one. You can see it here. If I hover, if I go through that step by step with the playhead, you can see the new sequence slides in from the left and pushes the old one out. So that's quite simple to build. It's not difficult. Transition series. We got sequence and transition, enter and exit. You don't necessarily have to use transition series for transitions between scenes. You can also use it to animate the entrance or exit of a scene by putting a transition first or last in the transition series. Okay, so if I add a transition after a sequence with no sequence thereafter, it will play that as an exit animation essentially. Okay. So that allows us for animating the appearance or disappearance of elements. Hi Max, do you have any advice for thinking of projects to build? I always tried asking several large language models, but as they are essentially token prediction machines, they tend to roughly give the same answer. So I was wondering if you have any advice for brainstorming. So what I would build, I guess there are a couple of options. You can build the standard stuff, which is like online shops, simple online shops. But online shops are great because you got a lot of important things in there, like authentication, shopping carts. You need a database. You got different pages. You got like an admin section. If you create products, you got a buyer section for the people that buy products. They can view their orders. So you got a lot of things in there, which is why dummy online shops are great projects to practice a lot of stuff. But if you want to build something which feels a bit more useful, I think, especially now with AI, it's really fun to build AI wrappers. So think of any app that uses AI behind the scenes. Just be careful about the cost, because of course you'll be paying for using AI APIs. But you can build your own ChatGPT clone. You can build an image generation app where you maybe tie together different APIs. You can build fun stuff by integrating AI into your apps. At least I find it fun. So if you want to mix it up and don't just build online shops and dummy social networks, building AI wrapper apps, image generators and so on, or video generators with Sora could be fun too. It'll just cost you some money. That's something to be aware of. But especially if you're just generating text, that's not too expensive. I can share the link for the video if you're interested. I am interested, but sharing links is not possible here in the chat, I'm afraid. So that will probably not work. But if that is fun and if that is useful, I will try to share more of the work I do with it to give some inspiration of what you can do maybe. So we saw transitions which allow us to change or to animate between scenes, which is obviously very useful. We can also see the built-in transitions with some nice demos here. So that's all the stuff that's built in. Got some old school PowerPoint vibes with the cube transition here. And then timings, spring timings, linear timing, or custom timing if you want to control the acceleration and then and how the animation is played over a certain time frame. You can do that as well, as it seems, in detail. We can also have audio effects in our transitions. That's interesting. Get duration and frames. So there's a lot of stuff. Using fonts, okay, yeah, we can use fonts, so I'm not too interested in that. Measuring DOM nodes. If you want to measure DOM nodes, you can assign a React Ref to it and then use get bounding client rect, so the standard browser API. In Remotion, it's not, we cannot do that. It's not that easy because the div element in which the video is rendered has a scale transform applied to it, which affects the value. So we can use a hook instead if we need the dimensions of an element because they are resizing it for us, as it seems. Am I from Germany or Austria? Germany it is. Do you have some course or tutorial how to plan a React application, how to design it, paint the whole component tree and everything before starting to code? Which free tool do you recommend? I don't have a course on that. And to be honest, I'm a bad planner myself. I make plans just to then change it. But one very basic tool I really like is XCalibur. I like that tool for like building basic wireframes or component trees. You can then export that, obviously. There are way more sophisticated tools out there, but I really like it for its simplicity and ease of use. But again, I have a wild mixture of planning, writing code, changing the plan, changing the code. I'm probably not the best person to talk about proper planning, I'm afraid. Okay. Randomness. The following thing is an anti-pattern in Remotion, deriving values randomly. While this will work during preview, it will break while rendering. Oh, these are always tricky situations. The reason is that Remotion is spinning up multiple instances of the web page to render frames in parallel, and the random values will be different. Oh, that's interesting. So here, blinds are coming up. Here, in the browser preview, that's just one instance. It's my browser rendering everything. But when I click render here and render the video, then it does stuff in parallel. Okay. Fix the problem. Use the random API from Remotion to get deterministic pseudo-random values. Okay, so be careful with random stuff. Noise visualization. This example shows how to create a floating dot grid surface using the noise 3D function by the noise package. So they got a lot of utility packages. So if you want to generate like an animated noise pattern, you can do it with that, as it seems, which makes sense. So essentially, it is not uncommon that you might want a background in a video that has some animation, some moving parts, and that movement should have some randomness. So if you want that, you need to use the random function, or since it's such a common requirement, you can use that noise function, as it seems, to have an easier time generating noisy stuff that you could use as a background in a video. And you, of course, still can control what gets rendered for every random value, so you can still control how exactly that pattern looks like. So that's nice. I see that being useful. You can add, subtract, and multiply animation values to create more complex animations. Let's actually try that noise thing. I'll make it simple. I'll copy that and then play around with it. So here I'll have my noisy BG, my noisy background. I'll paste that in. I need to install that noise package. So install Remotion noise. Start that development server. Export that function, that component function here. And then let's see how that works in first steps. So since I want to use it as a background, I should probably use it on top of absolute fill. Or, so let's see, if I add my noise BG here, and actually I want to rename the component function to noise BG2. So if I have my noise background here, and I set some values for these props, how does that work? Okay, so now, whoa, that's quite noisy. Let's turn down that speed. Still pretty fast. So now we got this. It's not really a background though. We should probably give this style position absolute, top left, and so on. So now it's a background. And can I also add this not here, but in first steps as a wrapper? Or actually, what if I add a fragment here and my noise background here? Import that. So that will not work. And what if I make this an absolute fill component? Still not. Yeah, because my components, of course, also have absolute fill. What if I make this here a div without a background color? Now that works. So now if I go to circles, I can also turn this into a div. And now I should have that background throughout the entire video. It's not beautiful, but it's working. And of course, I can definitely see having the requirement of adding an animated background to a video. So is quite straightforward with this noise function. And then in here, a lot of math going on here for basically calculating the values for drawing those circles. So in here, we could then use, can we? No, what do we have here? Gray. So we can't use, can we use Tailwind classes here? Does Tailwind have, oh, the Tailwind SVG fill? Fill, yeah. Can we use like fill indigo 500? Not really, right? So why not? Oh yeah, because that is a class. So we would need class name fill indigo 500. Yeah, okay. So now we can also easily change that with some Tailwind classes. And if I wanna have a bit more opacity. So I don't want to go up the way to fully opaque. Let's say it should be at most 50% opaque to have a more subtle background. I can just change my range here. So again, we saw that before, interpolate, which animates values over time and it maps a range to another range, and the range we map to is the opacity values we render. And here I limit the upper, the maximum opacity to 0.5 to have 50% transparency. And Noise 3D is producing those random values here for me. So what is IJ? Which inputs does noise 3D take actually? It gives me random numbers in a certain range, right? Or let's take a look. I want to understand this. Noise 3D. A seed number for the randomness, the first dimensional, second, and third dimensional values, and then it returns a value between -1 and 1, swinging as your x, y, and z values change. Okay. Yeah, it's noise 3D because we got those free values. Oh god, my browser just froze. Yeah. Okay, it's working again. Good. Okay, I will probably need some more time to fully understand this, to be very honest with you. So frame, of course, is... Yeah, it's the current frame, right? Yeah, it's the current frame. Yeah, I don't want to bore you. I'll probably want to dive a bit deeper into that to fully understand how these values are derived. But in the end, we're generating random values here, which allow us for randomly animating stuff. We're changing the opacity here. Do you have some course or tutorial how to, I did read that. It is necessary first to write raw ideas, not just have it in mind, but to create visible plan, then start and code. In your courses, you already know what you want to code. Show us how to plan. Yeah, again, as I said, I do plan, but I'm a bit chaotic when it comes to that. Obviously, for the courses, I got a very detailed plan. But that's not the same as if I'm working on my own real projects. I have a plan there too, but I iterate really quickly, and I prefer iterating a lot and having a rough plan and small detailed plans instead of planning out everything ahead of time just to then see that something doesn't work and I change it anyways. Is a course on Electron.js something you would consider doing? Your style of teaching would really help a lot. Yeah, Electron.js is super interesting, I will say that. It's just not #1 on my priority list right now. Also, to be very honest, because I have barely worked with it, so I would first have to learn it myself, and I don't teach something which I haven't used for a longer time because I want to teach stuff I know a lot about, and that would not be true for Electron.js, I'm afraid. Okay, so we had all the noise stuff here. Now, animation math. You can add, subtract, and multiply animation values. We did that already. We multiplied a value by 500 to also change the range. Yeah, it's really nice. So, yeah, creating animations like this, I like that. Embedding videos. Adding videos. You can embed existing videos into Remotion by using the off-thread video component. So that allows us to, well, include existing videos, as the name suggests. Trimming allows us to change which part of the video is being played. We can delay it, we can resize it, we can set the volume. That's really interesting, being able to combine that. Make timeline duration the same. How do I make the composition the same duration as my video? So if I bring in a video, and you want to make the composition the same duration, make the video source a React prop. Then define calculate metadata function that calculates the duration of the composition video based on the video. So they are creating a helper function here, which parses the video file, gets the duration. Okay, and then returns the configuration, which is then used here to dynamically configure this composition. Yeah. But that is a function that's called automatically. So calculate metadata is a function we can define, but Remotion supports it. We can pass that function to a composition, and Remotion will call it automatically and pass our props to it, which allows us to use our props in there to dynamically derive settings for this composition. That's useful. Playing videos in sequence. Yeah, I think I'll explore that separately because I don't have a video which I want to include right now. Jump cuts. Sometimes you want to implement a jump cut to skip to a part of video. So how would you do that? Okay, that's a bit more complex. Trim before. Okay, yeah. I'll have to do that with it when I got an actual video. That could be interesting, but yeah, I will have to play around with that. Audio is the same. I don't have a file available yet. Let's take a look at parameterized videos. Remotion allows for ingesting, validating, visually editing, and transforming data that may be used to parameterize a video. Data may influence the content of the video, and we saw that at the beginning here in root with the first demo compositions that were created here, that we could, for example, pass props to them to change the content of the video. So you could easily build components that define a video, including like multiple sequences and stuff like this. And then you can pass props to your composition. At least I think that is where this article is going to. And then configure and reuse that arrangement you have to quickly produce different videos with different inputs, which is really exciting if you have something you need to produce a lot. If you're building like a short for Instagram and YouTube shorts, and you want to have some marketing shorts, and let's say you want to always have the same kind of style, or you have like 10 predefined styles where you got an image animating in and some motivational quote being rendered on top of it and stuff like that. And you could just build that flow once and then change the quote, change the image, and render that video based on your predefined components. That's the stuff I find really interesting, being able to have something like this. And then you could still combine that with some normally recorded video where you might be doing some voiceover, but you can have that pre-built fragment which you can easily adjust and reuse. So yeah, I find that interesting. Or if we're talking about info graphics, that could be interesting too. And especially now with AI, maybe you can even get AI to dynamically generate the inputs so that you can have an automated workflow where you just define what should be rendered and how, and then you have variable inputs that may even be generated dynamically by AI. So everything is dynamic. Wow. Okay. To determine which data gets passed to the video, the following steps are taken. Default props are defined statically so that the video can be designed in the studio without any data. So that is what we got here, right? So, for example, here in my composition, first steps, which is a bad name, I should probably name it, it doesn't matter. I'll keep first steps, but it's all about boxes and circles, right? So not a great name. But we could say that in first steps, we want to get some props here. And let's say we want to make our colors configurable. So we have some colors, and I'm defining a TypeScript type here, which is an object where we have rectangle colors, which is a string, and circle colors, which is a string. And then we extract our colors here. We go to the boxes component, and we could build this in a more reusable way, but here I'll do it like this. So in boxes, we could have our color, which is of type string. We pull that out of here so that boxes is configurable. And we then go down here and instead of having BG red 500, I'll get rid of those Tailwind classes. Alternatively, we could also accept Tailwind classes as input. And yeah, let's actually do that. Sorry, let's actually do that. Let's render this as a template literal. And let's assume color is a Tailwind class. So we got color here, we got that here. So that should be a Tailwind background color class. And we do the same in circles. So let's use some cursor magic for getting this. Let's name it color class, actually, to be a bit more descriptive. Color class. Also down here with good old tab completion. And then here we also hit tab to adjust this. And now back in first steps, we need to pass the color class props here. And that should be color, let's name this color classes. color classes and extract that. And then here we got color classes rectangle, color classes circle. And now back to the root, we can set some default props here. And we have to set some default props. You see I'm getting an error if I don't do it. So we have to set some default props to set red and blue. But now we could override this. Though to be fair, for Tailwind classes, it's actually a bad example now that I think of it. Because if we override this in the studio, Tailwind will not know in advance that a certain class is used and will therefore probably not generate it, because Tailwind is generating all the classes dynamically. So it will find these here in my code, but not the ones I define in my studio. So for that reason, I apologize. I'll go back to the name colors. And also here, go back to colors. And in boxes, name this color. And not use a Tailwind class here. Instead, that can be a hard-coded string again. No, cursor, stop doing that. And instead here in style, I'll add my background color and set this to the color prop I'm getting. So now I want just a color, a hex value, or the color name. What's going on here? That can be a self-closing div. Did I delete something that should be there? That can be a self-closing div. Okay. So now in circles, it's the same. That should be color. That here becomes a hard-coded string again. And then we just set the background color like this. And now in first steps, we pass the color props here based on our colors, plural prop. And in root, we set the colors, we set it to red and blue, and now we can safely override it. So with that, if I go back to the studio, we have the defaults like before, but we can parameterize. Why is this jumping around, by the way? Why is this flickering? Did I change something there? Should be flickering. That's weird. Where is this coming from? Does it also, like, if I remove the background? Yeah. I can't rule out that it's my system here, because it has been quite slow before too. But it could also be something else. But it worked fine before, so I'm not sure. Let's assume it's not really an issue. What I wanted to show is that now that I parameterized this, I can change those values here in the studio by adding a schema prop. Okay, I make this editable in root by adding a schema. Oh, and a schema is defined how? With sort, right? So yeah, with sort, I can basically export a schema thing to describe how this is configured. So in first steps composition, I would export my the first steps schema using sort, describing the shape of my props. And then back in root, schema here would be set to first steps schema, which is simply imported from that component file. And when I do that, I can change that here. So now I can change that to green and it becomes green. I can change it to yellow and all that fun stuff. And that's the part where we can predefine how stuff gets rendered and then change the details, which is really, really amazing for building like automated workflows where you want to generate videos. So I find that quite interesting. Okay, so we can and we must define default props. Input props may be specified when rendering a video. Yeah, that's what we just did to override them. Calculate metadata is what we saw before if we need to derive the settings of the to-be generated video based on the props we're passing in. So if we're building like more complex workflows like we saw before in the docs with a video being passed as an input. So if you include a video in the to-be created video, then you can dynamically derive the metadata of the to-be created video based on that. I guess another example would be if the length here, if I want to be able to set that in my studio, instead of hard coding it here, well, how does that work? Calculate metadata, duration frames. So I guess we can overwrite that value here with calculate metadata then to derive a different value based on props. Okay. So passing props, you can parameterize the content of videos using React props. We did that already with the colors. We defined the default props. We defined the schema to be able to configure it from the studio. Okay, we can also start rendering from the command line and then pass our props like this. That's interesting to know because, of course, if you want to fully automate this, you don't want to start this studio here and manually press render and manually define your prop values. You don't want to do that. If you want to have an automated flow, you want to call that from the command line to have a script that runs every day at 9 a.m. or whatever, and then you can pass your props like this. So it makes sense to have this flexibility. Yeah, we can even render it with GitHub Actions, sure. You can still use components normally. Even if a component is registered as a composition, you can still use it like a regular React component and pass the props directly. Defining a schema, we did that. As an alternative to using TypeScript types, you may use sort. You also want to do this if you want to edit the props visually in Remotion Studio. That's why we did it. Visual editing, edit default props visually. You can edit them by adding a schema. We did that. Okay, not all sort types are supported, but a decent amount. Data fetching. In Remotion, you may fetch data from an API to use it in your video. Use this page. On this page, we documented recipes and best practices. Fetching data before render. That I see that be an interesting pattern. Again, if you want to dynamically render videos, if you got your pre-built flow, but the data changes, you want to fetch it before you start rendering, obviously. The data being fetched using calculate metadata. So you may use calculate metadata prop to alter the props. So whenever the props are dynamic. I mean, I guess you have two ways of fetching data that you need as props, right? Because since you can invoke this from the command line, like this, the props are here, right? So you could write a totally independent script with Bash or with JavaScript or with Python. And in that script, you could go to some server, fetch some data, and then use that data, which you fetched in a different script, to run this command here, to run this command here, and dynamically populate that based on the data you fetched in another script. So you don't have to do it in your Remotion React app, I guess. You can just fetch it in advance. Or, as it seems, you can also utilize calculate metadata for that. As we see in this example, if you want to do it all in the same code base, you can call fetch here, fetch the data, return the dynamically derived props object, and then rendering, as it is described here, only starts once that metadata has been calculated. Thanks to your courses, I could get a job as a software developer, and I try to improve to even more senior level. Means a lot to me. Thank you so much for the amazing feedback. I'm super, super happy that my courses helped you get there, that my courses helped you get a job. That's just amazing to hear. Thank you so, so much, Libor. Max, we've missed your courses. Well, I released a couple of new courses this year and got no plans of stopping updating and creating courses. Do you have to type all of that metadata out when you code or what? You mean this metadata here? Yes, but you can also calculate it dynamically if you have a requirement to do so, if the length is not set in stone, for example. And it's not a lot of metadata in the end. It's just like duration, FPS, width, height, and then props if you got some. And calculate metadata is totally optional, which you only need if you got some metadata, some configuration that can't be defined upfront. So we got that. Okay, setting the duration based on data. Yeah, we can also return a duration in frames in calculation, in calculate metadata. So that all makes sense. We can also fetch data during the render though. Using delay render and continue render, you can tell Remotion to wait. So we can start rendering and then only fetch during that. I wonder when we might want to do that. It's not totally obvious to me, to be honest. Use this approach to load assets which are not JSON serializable, or if you're using a Remotion version lower than 4.0. Okay, so we won't use it if we're fetching JSON data, which is most data we will probably need. If we're fetching assets like images or so, my understanding is we could then do it during render. But I wonder why we would not do it before starting to render. It's maybe more of a legacy feature, or I'm missing the obvious use case. You may change the duration of the video based on some asynchronous determined data. The same goes, with calculate metadata, we can set the duration in frames. We saw that before. We can also use effect, the forbidden hook, and get input props, the old hook or the old function. Okay. Rendering. There are various ways to render your video. Remotion Studio, we use that. In general, locally, with the CLI also. And I read that before. You can also render it on the server. I just wonder, how does that work here? Remotion's rendering engine is built with Node.js, which makes it easy to render a video in the cloud. The easiest and fastest way is by using Lambda. Not sure if it's the cheapest way necessarily, though. We can also use the Node API. We can use it, render it with GitHub Actions, using Docker. Let's take a look at the Node.js example. So we can use that special renderer package. Can be used in Node and Bun. We need to create a Remotion bundle, select the composition to render, and render the video. So what are we doing here? So that is some code we would execute with Node.js, for example, on a VPS. We define the composition we want to render. Obviously, we could also fetch that in our script from some API, or set up our own webhook that triggers the render process, where this is dynamically received from the request that may be reaching our server, so that we're rendering on request. Then we create the bundle based on our code. Okay, we do that once, so we can do it in advance. Then we derive the parameters, the props for that render cycle. We select which composition to render, and then we go ahead and render that. Quite straightforward. I'm really looking forward to trying to build my own render pipeline here that runs on a VPS, where I define my video structure and then just send the request and have it render. Encoding guide. Backed by FMPG, Remotion allows you to configure a variety of encoding settings. Okay, so we got the common codecs, even ProRes. Wow. Well, if it's using FMPG, it can obviously use whatever they support. A lot of codecs, therefore still images. Remotion is a great solution for rendering thumbnails of videos or dynamic still images too. Yeah, so I saw that before here. If you click on render in the studio, there is this still option. So I can render a JPEG file. I'm not sure based on what, based on my current position here. So will I now get an image with the current frame as 28? Let's click render still. It's starting the job because it obviously still needs to render the video to take a screenshot from in the middle of the video. So it's still doing that. It's doing bundling, which we just saw we would need to do on the server as well. And what did it render now? Yeah, okay, it rendered that exact screenshot I saw here with frame 28, so where my playhead was. I see that being useful as well. We can also trigger that with CLI. Output scaling. So we can render it in multiple dimensions in one render cycle, or in multiple render cycles, but we can easily like adjust that, as it seems. Transparent videos. Chrome and Firefox support WebM videos with alpha channels, okay. GIFs or GIFs. You can render a video as a GIF by passing codec GIF. So that's the meme generator right there. Overlays. If you want to export a Remotion video to use it as an overlay or transition in a conventional video editing software, you can export it as a transparent Apple ProRes file. So that is something I will say can be really useful. Maybe it's kind of a niche use case, but when I'm creating my tutorial videos or other kinds of videos, I often need overlays like info boxes, call outs, something like this. And you can build them with Adobe After Effects or Adobe Premiere to some extent. But I will say, if I could leverage my knowledge about the web and about React to build some beautiful overlays with Remotion and then render them with Remotion and include them in Premiere Pro, that might be easier for me than doing it in After Effects. So that could actually be useful, being able to create overlays. Yeah, like this, like such an overlay here. With Remotion, I see that being useful. Yeah, so here we can see it being used in, what is that, Final Cut? No, this is the DaVinci Resolve. So here we see that overlay being used, and yeah, that's nice to have. Render a data set. You can use Remotion to do a batch render to create many videos based on a data set. So I don't even need to invoke the CLI manually multiple times. I can just define my data. And then what? I write a script to what you saw before, the Node.js script. And then I loop through that. Yeah, I can programmatically render multiple videos based on different data pieces, I guess. Render all compositions, video formats. We got MP4. We got the common formats in general. And emitting artifacts. Yeah, subtitles is not supported by Cloud Run. You can use the artifact component. What's that? By rendering an artifact tag in your Remotion markup, an extra file will get emitted. And the content. So if I go to first steps and in there I add this artifact component, test text with hello world. If I now render this, video like this, I should get this text file. An artifact with output, the render failed because an artifact with output test text was already registered at frame 0, but now registered again at frame 2. Okay, so I cannot include it like this. Where do I include it? Oh, if frame is 0? Okay, so we don't wanna, so we wanna render this only one. If frame is 0, we wanna include that. And therefore, since I'm not tracking my frames here, I could go to boxes, or I guess, well, let's go back. Let's add it here, and then let's just get the frame with the use current frame hook. So now I'm only rendering this once, and see, it looks like I have to do it like this. If I now render this video again, now it's rendering successfully as it seems. And now if I open that file or that folder, I got that text file here with hello world inside of it. And obviously that's not useful for hello world, but if we had included audio in here, we could of course use an API like 11 Labs to generate subtitles, and then we could automatically output subtitle files, I guess. Yeah, so that's the example here, right? So they got generate subtitles to also emit a subtitles file for the video you're producing. The asset should only be rendered for one single frame. Otherwise, the asset will get emitted multiple times, or we actually got an error. It is possible to emit multiple assets, but they may not have the same file name. Okay. Emitting thumbnails. You can emit the image data of the current frame as an artifact. So they give us an easy way of taking a snapshot at a very specific position. And obviously we could use any frame we want here. So if I created like a thumb dot, what is it, JPEG? Yeah, thumb.jpg, and I set the content to artifact.thumbnail, it'll take a screenshot for me. And if I do that at frame 20, let's say, and I then render this, if I then render this and wait for it to finish, then I should get a nice, yeah, here's my thumbnail. And as you can see, that was taken, whoops, that was taken at frame 20. So if you know that a very specific frame you want to take a screenshot, you can do it. So artifact looks quite useful. What else do we have? We can use render still to render a screenshot. We saw that before, or render specific frames. I guess if we only want to render some of the frames, like a fraction. Setting video metadata. Video files can store metadata in them. This metadata can be viewed using the npx remotion ffprobe command. We can also add metadata, like title, artist, and so on. Okay. Hardware acceleration. Encoding is the process of converting a sequence of images into a video. Besides rendering frames, encoding is one of the 2 steps required to create a video. From Remotion, that version, it supports hardware accelerated encoding in some cases, not always. Since encoding is platform encoding specific, only a few scenarios are supported. Only Mac OS is supported. Yay, I got that. And ProRes is supported, or H.264. So actually what I'm rendering here, I'm on a Mac, on Mac OS, using the H.264 codec. That should be hardware accelerated. I'm not sure if it is if I'm rendering it through the studio though, but I would assume it is. But it should be if I render it through the command line. Okay, HDR, high dynamic range is a feature that allows for a wider range of colors and brightness. Remotion uses a headless Chrome browser to render, which does not support HDR. Okay, so we are not supporting HDR. And if we embed a HDR video, it is converted, or it must be converted. By the way, the question, are you looking at Ripple.js? It's the new and upcoming framework that already has a lot of traction. I have heard about it. I have not yet looked at it. I might do a separate live stream on that. Might be interesting, but yet thus far I have not looked at it yet, to be honest. Okay, so that's the studio. We saw that. We can deploy it to a VPS. Probably want to put basic auth in front of it then to make sure not everybody can access it. Server-side rendering, we saw that with the Node.js command. We could also use a Docker container for rendering it in there, which would kind of do the same in the end, of course. Using the Remotion player, you can embed Remotion videos in any React app and customize the video content at runtime. So I guess the Remotion player is what's getting used here in this studio, which we did not build ourselves, but I guess they are using the player in there because, well, that's what we have here, a player. The following templates include the player and Lambda rendering and are a good starting point for building a video app. So that's next level then, right? You can either build a video programmatically with React components and automate that, and then you can even build a player that plays that video so that you can build an application that allows users to build their own video with that player and your components and this library. At least that's how I understand it. But I will say that is something, just like all the other parts here, I will not be able to get into today since I'm already running out of time. Now, I know this was a bit of a different stream, and maybe a bit more theoretic, more me reading through docs, but nonetheless, hopefully a bit interesting. Maybe also a package that's interesting to you. I will definitely explore it a bit more off stream because I see it being useful for some of the workflows I have. In my next stream, next week, yes, next week should be a stream, I will probably do something totally different again. Maybe dive into Ripple.js, maybe dive into some other framework, maybe build an app, or I'll see. I have no plan yet. But yeah, I hope you liked today. I'll upload this video onto my Maximilian extended YouTube channel tomorrow, so you can watch it there if you missed the beginning, and all the other live streams too, you find them there. And yeah, thank you so much for joining. I hope you have a great day, evening, morning, whatever it is for you. And hopefully I see you again in future streams like next week. Have a great day. Bye, everybody.